Hi everyone, I've been trying to make this video for a while actually. It takes several attempts of filming to get these right. I've decided to make a video about the attack on Pearl Harbor, and I would just first like to take a moment to say I send my condolences to people up and down the UK at the loss of Queen Elizabeth II. It is a very sad time for this country, and I wish her family the absolute best. Back to the video. So the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was intended to knock out the US Pacific Fleet for 6 months and prevent them from joining World War II, or just give the Japanese long enough to just take every American holding in the Pacific and then play defensive. So the attack actually was carried out by 6 Japanese carriers, the carriers being Akagi and Kaga of the 1st Division. The carriers Hiru and Soru made up the 2nd Division, and making up the 3rd Division was the carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku. And those 6 carriers launched some 200 or more aircraft. I can't actually remember how many exactly, but there was more than 200 aircraft present from the Japanese. What made Pearl Harbor a particularly disastrous day for the US was they moved their Pacific Fleet there from San Diego in order to try and deter the Japanese from expanding their empire. And Japan basically just took it as an opportunity and proceeded to attempt to screw over the Americans. It did not work. They managed to sink about 8 battleships. Yeah, I've got a Wikipedia page next to me. 8 battleships that were either damaged or sunk. And among those ships was USS Oklahoma, USS West Virginia, the California, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Maryland. And possibly the most famous ship at Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona. Now, I'm sure a lot of people, if they've heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor, have heard about what happened to the Arizona. Okay, every other ship that was damaged or sunk at Pearl Harbor, the battleships, West Virginia was struck by 7 torpedoes and sank at an even keel thanks to counterflooding from her crew. Oklahoma was actually the Nevada's sister ship. It rolled over and was a complete loss. The Nevada hit by a torpedo and 5 very heavy bombs, like 1/4-ton bombs, 5 of them, had to beach herself on a coral reef to keep her from sinking. The rest of them all damaged to varying degrees. The California was sunk, but did return to service in 1944. West Virginia was a few months after the California, returned to service in July 1944. Just in time for the Battle of Guadalcanal. I will make a video on that battle at some point. It was one of the best naval traps ever laid, though, so what can you do? Just set what the Americans thought of Pearl Harbor. The US president at the time, I can't remember which one it was, he referred to it as a date which will live on in infamy. About 2,400 American sailors were killed in that attack, innocent civilians among them. And around half of those came from the USS Arizona when it was hit by a single bomb and its forward magazines detonated with such force that apparently that section of the ship was thrown out of the water. Like, some people might constantly hear the phrase blown out of the water. Arizona decided it was going to take that phrase literally. Very, very literally. All jokes aside, with the Arizona, like I said, 2,400 Americans lost their lives in the attack. And what made it particularly tragic was half of those were from Arizona, which I find incredibly sad. Arizona joined Oklahoma in being among the battleships that did not return to service for obvious reasons, such as about the four-quarter of the ship's length was completely just torn off. Arizona actually still lies at Pearl Harbor because they never bothered salvaging the ship because the sheer amount of dead bodies, the families didn't want the ship salvaged. And also, the US Navy was mainly focusing on clearing out other ships. Because the Arizona, they just literally, when they berthed ships up alongside it, they moored ships alongside it, they just ran bridges. They did not care about that wreck. Like, they're not going to go and ram a ship into it and park on top of it. Because it was a war grave. Like, home to 1,200 dead bodies. But they are just going to run bridges over it. And the Japanese also thought that Pearl Harbor was a severely bad idea. To quote the Japanese highest command of their navy, Grand Fleet Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, his words to the Japanese emperor after the attack were, and I quote, "I fear all we have done is awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve." Which is his way of saying, hi, we screwed up. Like, I could just imagine the Japanese command sat there, like, messaging Germany, like, yeah, by the way, we attacked the US Navy, we've completely crippled it, the Pacific's ours, and Germany's just sat here getting flashbacks to the Lusitania in World War I, like, excuse me, you did what? It was at that moment that Germany proceeded to just excommunicate Japan from the Axis powers. And probably for good reason, because cue later into the Second World War, when the Americans are just absolutely sick and tired of the Japanese, so decide they're going to turn the land of the rising sun, they're just going to drop the sun on it. Twice. And if no one's figured that out yet, I'm talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, otherwise known as the two cities that America decided to drop 2 nuclear bombs on. The bomb on Nagasaki was known as Fat Man, and there is a joke I could make that I'm not going to make because it would infuriate a lot of people. And the second one seems rather ironic to American obesity rates at the minute. It was called Little Boy. I can already hear the comments calling that one a little sus. No, seriously, America called their nuclear bombs that they dropped on Japan Fat Man and Little Boy. They both had the same effect. They leveled their respective cities. Fat Man dropped on Nagasaki and Little Boy on Hiroshima. They leveled it. And that is what you get for them permanently immobilizing 2 American ships. You damage the Pacific Fleet, and America's just gonna get really badly annoyed. Although, let me just mention, the USS West Virginia was sunk at Pearl Harbor and went on to then become the most successful US Navy battleship of World War II. Real ironic, isn't it? It's like, yeah, cue the Battle of the Surigao Strait when West Virginia was among several battleships present from the US Navy. Those battleships, there were 6 of them, and 5 of them were Pearl Harbor survivors, and that being West Virginia, California, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Maryland. The 6th one being USS Mississippi, which just decided to tag along for the ride. Because if you're going to throw firepower at the Japanese, you might as well throw it at them in excess. So the Americans just like, we've already got 5 battleships, and they all want revenge against the Japanese. We're just going to take this one, and we're just going to move that over here. Alright, lads, go kill the Japanese. Ships like West Virginia are the precise reason the Japanese had no navy left at the end of World War II. Sorry, they did. They had about 2 ships. Among those being the battleship Nagato, which after World War II, the Americans promptly yoinked as a war prize, and nuclear target, which is just America's fancy way of saying, we want something to play with and test our new toys on. It's like, nah, America's got some new toys, and they don't just want to test them out on their ships. Seriously, the Bikini Atoll nuclear tests, I will make videos on some of the ships involved in that at some point. But there were 2 ships there that weren't American, that I can remember off the top of my head. That being, like I've said, the Japanese battleship Nagato, and the German heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. You might remember that one from Battle of the Denmark Strait. It assisted in the destruction of HMS Hood. Yeah, it really got its comeuppance. Oh my god, because it was really ironic. The salvage of Pearl Harbor is absolutely incredible, though. I have nowhere near the capacity to make a series of videos on it. There is a YouTuber called Drachinifel who has a very good series on it. I will see if I can leave link to his videos in the description. And I just want to say again, I send my condolences to the British royal family at the loss of the Queen. And thank you for watching.